From the Tanglewood Tales, Part 5 of The Dragon's Teeth. I know not how far Cadmus had gone, nor could he himself have told you, when at no great distance before him he beheld a brindled cow. She was lying down by the wayside and quietly chewing her cud, nor did she take any notice of the young man until he had approached pretty nigh. Then, getting leisurely upon her feet, and giving her head a gentle toss, she began to move along at a moderate pace, often pausing just long enough to crop a mouthful of grass. Cadmus loitered behind, whistling idly to himself and scarcely noticing the cow, until the thought occurred to him whether this could possibly be the animal which, according to the oracle's response, was to serve him for a guide. But he smiled at himself for fancying such a thing. He could not seriously think that this was the cow, because she went along so quietly, behaving just like any other cow. Evidently, she neither knew nor cared so much a whisk of hay about Cadmus, and was only thinking about how to get her living along the wayside, where the herbage was green and fresh. Perhaps she was going home to be milked. "Cow, cow, cow," cried Cadmus. "Hey, Brindle, hey, Brindle. Stop, my good cow." He wanted to come up with the cow so as to examine her and see if she would appear to know him, or whether there were any peculiarities to distinguish her from 1,000 other cows, whose only business is to fill the milk pail and sometimes kick it over. But still the brindled cow trudged on, whisking her tail to keep the flies away, and taking as little notice of Cadmus as she well could. If he walked slowly, so did the cow, and seized the opportunity to graze. If he quickened his pace, the cow went just so much the faster, and once, when Cadmus tried to catch her by running, she threw out her heels, stuck her tail straight on end, and set off at a gallop, looking as queerly as cows generally do when putting themselves to their speed. When Cadmus saw that it was impossible to come up with her, he walked on moderately as before. The cow, too, went leisurely on without looking behind. Wherever the grass was greenest, there she nibbled a mouthful or two. Where a brook glistened brightly across the path, there the cow drank, and breathed a comfortable sigh and drank again, and trudged onward at the pace that best suited herself and Cadmus. "I do believe," thought Cadmus, "that this may be the cow that was foretold me. If it be the one, I suppose she will lie down somewhere hereabouts." Whether it were the oracular cow or some other one, it did not seem reasonable that she should travel a great way farther. So whenever they reached a particularly pleasant spot on a breezy hillside, or in a sheltered vale, or a flowery meadow, on the shore of a calm lake, or along the bank of a clear stream, Cadmus looked eagerly around to see if the situation would suit him for a home. But still, whether he liked the place or no, the brindled cow never offered to lie down. On she went at that quiet pace of a cow going homeward to the barnyard, and every moment Cadmus expected to see a milkmaid approaching with a pail, or a herdsman running to head the stray animal and turn her back toward the pasture. But no milkmaid came. No herdsman drove her back, and Cadmus followed the stray brindle till he was almost ready to drop down with fatigue. "Oh, brindled cow," cried he in a tone of despair, "do you never mean to stop?" He had now grown too intent on following her to think of lagging behind, however long the way, and whatever might be his fatigue. Indeed, it seemed as if there were something about the animal that bewitched people. Several persons who happened to see the brindled cow and Cadmus following behind began to trudge after her, precisely as he did. Cadmus was glad of somebody to converse with, and therefore talked very freely to these good people. He told them of all his adventures, and how he had left King Agenor at his palace, and Phoenix at one place, and Cilix at another, and Thascius at a third, and his dear mother, Queen Telephatia, under a flowery sod, so that now he was quite alone, both friendless and homeless. He mentioned likewise that the oracle had bidden him be guided by a cow, and inquired of the strangers whether they supposed that this brindled animal could be the one. "Why, 'tis a very wonderful affair," answered one of his new companions. "I'm pretty well acquainted with the ways of cattle, and I never knew a cow of his own accord to go so far without stopping. If my legs will let me, I will never leave following the beast till she lies down." "Nor I," said a second. "Nor I," cried a third, "if she goes 100 miles farther. I'm determined to see the end of it." The secret of it was, you must know, that the cow was an enchanted cow, and that, without her being conscious of it, she threw some kind of enchantment over everybody that took so much as half a dozen steps behind her. They could not possibly help following her, though all the time they fancied themselves doing it of their own accord. The cow was by no means very nice in choosing her path, so that sometimes they had to scramble over rocks or wade through mud and mire, and were in a terribly bedraggled condition and tired to death and very hungry into the bargain. What a weary business it was! But still they kept trudging stoutly forward and talking as they went. The strangers grew very fond of Cadmus and resolved never to leave him, but to help him build a city wherever the cow might lay down. In the center of it there should be a noble palace in which Cadmus might dwell and be their king, with a throne, a crown, and a scepter, a purple robe, and everything else that a king ought to have, for in him there was the royal blood and the royal heart, and the head that knew how to rule. While they were talking of these schemes and beguiling the tediousness of the way with laying out the plan of the new city, one of the company happened to look at the cow. "Joy, joy!" cried he, clapping his hands. "Brindle is going to lie down." They all looked, and sure enough, the cow had stopped. It was staring leisurely about her, as other cows do when on the point of lying down. And slowly, slowly did she recline herself on the soft grass, first bending her forelegs, then crouching her hind ones. When Cadmus and his companions came up with her, there was the brindled cow taking her ease, chewing her cud, and looking them quietly in the face, as if this was just the spot she had been seeking for, and as if it were all a matter of course. "This, then," said Cadmus, gazing around him, "this is to be my home." It was a fertile and lovely plain, with great trees flinging their sun-speckled shadows over it, and hills fencing it in from the rougher weather. At no great distance they beheld a river gleaming in the sunshine. A home feeling stole into the heart of poor Cadmus. He was very glad to know that here he might awake in the morning without the necessity of putting on his dusty sandals to travel farther and farther. The days and years would pass over him and find him still in this pleasant spot. If he could have had his brothers with him and his friend Thascius, and could have seen his dear mother under a roof of his own, he might here have been happy after all their disappointments. Some day or other, too, his sister Europa might have come quietly to the door of his house and smiled round upon the familiar faces. But indeed, since there was no hope of regaining the friends of his boyhood or ever seeing his dear sister again, Cadmus resolved to make himself happy with these new companions who had grown so fond of him while following the cow. "Yes, my friends," said he to them, "this is to be our home. Here we will build our habitations. The brindled cow which has led us hither will supply us with milk. We will cultivate the neighboring soil and lead an innocent and happy life." His companions joyfully assented to his plan, and in the first place, being very hungry and thirsty, they looked about them for the means of providing a comfortable meal. Not far off, they saw a tuft of trees which appeared as if there might be a spring of water beneath them. They went thither to fetch some, leaving Cadmus stretched on the ground along with the brindled cow. For now that he had found a place of rest, it seemed as if all the weariness of his pilgrimage, ever since he left King Agenor's palace, had fallen upon him at once. But his new friends had not long been gone when he was suddenly startled by cries, shouts, and screams, and all the noise of a terrible struggle. And in the midst of it all, a most awful hissing, which went right through his ears like a rough saw. And I think we're going to pause here and continue with this story in the next video. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching. I hope you've reached down, clicked like and subscribe, and left a comment. Love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.